You're sitting in a meeting and someone proposes an idea that makes absolutely no sense. The logic is broken, the evidence is missing, the conclusion contradicts itself. You wait for someone to point this out, but instead everyone nods, they agree, they smile. And suddenly you're the problem for asking a simple question. But why? Or you're scrolling online and you see a claim that's obviously false. It takes 10 seconds to verify, but thousands of people are sharing it, believing it, defending it with rage. And when you present actual evidence, you're not thanked, you're attacked. Welcome to the age of collective stupidity, where critical thinking isn't just rare, it's actively discouraged. Where asking questions makes you difficult, where thinking for yourself makes you dangerous. And today, we're going to uncover exactly how this happened, why it's getting worse, and what it means for the people who refuse to stop thinking. Let's start with an uncomfortable truth. Most people don't think, not really. They absorb information, repeat it, and mistake that for understanding. They collect opinions like souvenirs and call it knowledge. They scroll, they react, they move on. But actual thinking, critical analysis, that requires effort most people aren't willing to invest, and society has made it easier than ever to avoid that effort. Noam Chomsky warned us about this decades ago. He explained how power structures rely on what he called the manufacturing of consent. In other words, when people are trained to consume without questioning, to agree without understanding, they become easy to manage, easy to control, easy to manipulate. Critical thinking is inconvenient. It slows down conversations. It challenges authority. It asks uncomfortable questions. It refuses to accept simple answers to complex problems. And in a world obsessed with speed, certainty, and tribal loyalty, that makes you the enemy. Think about how often you've been told to stop overthinking, as if thinking too much is the problem, as if deep analysis is a character flaw, as if questioning the narrative makes you paranoid instead of prudent. The message is clear: consume, agree, move on. Don't dig deeper, don't ask why, don't make it complicated. But here's what nobody tells you: complexity is where truth lives. And the moment you stop tolerating complexity, you stop accessing reality. Now let's talk about what's actually happening in your brain when you're exposed to modern information systems, because this isn't just about culture, it's about neuroscience. Daniel Levitin, a neuroscientist who studies information processing, discovered something disturbing. The average person today processes 5 times more information per day than people did just a few decades ago. 5 times. Your brain was not designed for this volume. It's not built to evaluate hundreds of claims, arguments, and narratives every single day while also managing work, relationships, and survival. So what does it do? It takes shortcuts. It relies on cognitive biases. It looks for social proof. If lots of people believe this, it must be true. It defaults to authority. If an expert said it, I don't need to verify. It trusts familiarity. If I've heard this before, it feels real. These are survival mechanisms. Your brain is trying to conserve energy, but in the process, it's outsourcing your thinking to the crowd, and the crowd is often wrong. This is why misinformation spreads faster than truth, because truth requires verification. Misinformation just requires repetition. You see a headline, it confirms what you already believe. You share it. You've just participated in collective stupidity. Not because you're unintelligent, but because your brain is overwhelmed and looking for shortcuts. And the systems feeding you information know this. They exploit it. They engineer it. Let's talk about something most people have stopped doing: deep reading. The kind where you sit with a long text, follow a complex argument from beginning to end, and actually think about what you're reading. Marianne Wolf, a neuroscientist who studies literacy, has shown that our brains are being fundamentally rewired by digital media. We now skim more than we read. We jump between tabs. We struggle to maintain sustained attention on anything longer than a few paragraphs. But here's the problem. Critical thinking requires sustained attention. You cannot analyze, reflect, or truly understand if your brain is constantly fracturing its focus. Think about the last time you read an entire article without checking your phone. The last time you finished a book that challenged your assumptions. The last time you sat with a difficult idea long enough to actually understand it instead of just reacting to it. For most people, that was years ago, maybe never. And this isn't just about reading. It's about the capacity for deep thought itself. When your attention span is shattered, your ability to think complexly is shattered with it. You become a consumer of fragments, headlines, sound bites, hot takes, none of which give you the full picture, all of which train your brain to accept incomplete information as sufficient. And once that happens, you stop noticing what's missing. Here's where it gets personal. Critical thinking is uncomfortable. It forces you to admit you don't know everything. It challenges your beliefs. It creates cognitive dissonance, that painful feeling when your actions and values don't align. Most people can't tolerate that discomfort, so they avoid it. They surround themselves with people who think like them. They consume media that confirms what they already believe, and they reject evidence that contradicts their identity. Psychology calls this confirmation bias, and it's one of the most powerful forces destroying critical thinking today. Because here's the truth. Being wrong feels like dying. Not literally, but psychologically. Your ego is built on certainty, on being right, on belonging to a tribe that agrees with you. So when someone presents evidence that challenges your worldview, your brain doesn't process it as information. It processes it as an attack. Your amygdala fires, your defenses activate, and instead of thinking, you fight. This is why facts don't change minds, because people aren't evaluating facts logically. They're defending their identity emotionally. And in a culture that values confidence over accuracy, certainty over humility, loyalty over truth, critical thinking becomes a threat to social survival. Let's talk about education, because this is where critical thinking should be taught, but it's not. John Taylor Gatto, an award-winning teacher who became one of the most outspoken critics of traditional schooling, argued that modern education was never designed to create independent thinkers. It was designed during the industrial age to create obedient workers. Students are taught what to think, not how to think. They're evaluated on their ability to memorize and regurgitate, not on their ability to question and analyze. Curiosity is treated as a distraction. Conformity is rewarded. Original thought is punished as disruptive. And this pattern doesn't end in school. It intensifies in adulthood. In the workplace, speaking out gets you labeled difficult. Questioning leadership makes you disloyal. Challenging the consensus isolates you. In media, nuance is ignored. Complexity is reduced to binaries. Depth is sacrificed for virality. In social settings, asking too many questions makes people uncomfortable. Being right when everyone else is wrong makes you unpopular. So people learn to stay silent, to conform, to stop thinking critically because the social cost is too high. And the scariest part? Most people don't even realize they've stopped thinking. They believe they're making independent choices when they're actually following scripts they absorbed without question. Now let's address the elephant in the room: social media, the greatest accelerant of collective stupidity ever created. These platforms were designed to maximize engagement, not truth. They reward outrage, not accuracy. And they amplify emotion, not evidence. And they create echo chambers where people only see information that reinforces what they already believe. Marshall McLuhan saw this coming in the 1960s. He warned that the medium is the message, meaning the way we receive information changes how we think. And today's mediums encourage speed over depth, reaction over reflection, certainty over humility. You see a post, it makes you angry, you share it. You've just participated in an outrage cycle designed to keep you scrolling, not thinking. You see a headline that confirms your beliefs. You don't click the article. You don't verify the source. You just accept it as true because it feels right. And the algorithm learns. It shows you more of what you already believe. Your worldview narrows. Your thinking becomes more rigid. And you start to believe that your carefully curated feed represents reality. But it doesn't. It's a funhouse mirror designed to keep you engaged, not informed. The platforms know this. They have the data. They understand how human psychology works, and they exploit it for profit while society fragments into tribes that can't even agree on basic facts. So what happens to the people who refuse to stop thinking? The ones who still question, analyze, and demand evidence? They become exhausting to be around. They slow down conversations. They complicate simple narratives. They point out contradictions. They refuse to just agree, and society punishes them for it. Not overtly, but quietly, through exclusion, through mockery, through the subtle message that thinking too much makes you the problem. But here's what history shows us. Progress has always come from the people who refuse to stop thinking. Galileo, Darwin, Socrates, Martin Luther King Jr. They were all rejected, ridiculed, or killed for challenging the collective stupidity of their time, and yet their willingness to think independently shaped the world we live in today. So if you're someone who still thinks critically in a world that's given up on it, you're not crazy, you're not overthinking, you're not being difficult, you're doing something rare and necessary. You're refusing to participate in the comfortable delusion that passes for consensus, and that refusal, it's an act of resistance. So here's what you need to understand. Collective stupidity thrives because critical thinking is hard. It requires effort. It requires humility. It requires the willingness to be wrong, to change your mind, to sit with uncertainty. Most people aren't willing to do that. They want answers, not questions. They want certainty, not complexity. They want to belong, not to be right. And as long as that's true, the crowd will always choose comfort over truth. But you don't have to. You can ask better questions. You can verify before you share. You can read deeply instead of skimming. You can tolerate discomfort instead of seeking easy answers. You can think. Not because it makes you popular, not because it makes life easier, but because the alternative is surrendering your mind to forces that don't care about truth. They care about control. And once you give up your ability to think for yourself, you're no longer free. You're just another voice in the chorus, a repeating lines someone else wrote. So the question isn't whether critical thinking is disappearing. It is. The question is, will you be one of the people who keeps it alive? Because the world doesn't need more agreement. It needs more people brave enough to ask, but is this actually true? And if you're one of those people, you're not the problem. You're the solution.